You're listening to the audio portion of Workshop Wednesdays. Workshop Wednesdays is a free live discussion about topics affecting accountants, bookkeepers, and business owners. You can join the ABO group in Facebook to participate live Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Just search for ABBO in Facebook. This podcast is brought to you by Schoolofbookkeeping.com, where you will learn, grow, and build a thriving bookkeeping practice. We have hundreds of lessons with almost every aspect of the industry. Start your free month today at Schoolofbookkeeping.com.
Welcome to another Workshop Wednesdays brought to you by Schoolofbookkeeping.com, where it's casual conversations for serious workflow. And speaking of casual, look at Rachel. She's just in her casual attire.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. This is why we do these things on an as needed. We're fitting this into our busy day, and I appreciate you for being able to squeeze us in.
I've explained to some people before that I am a dance mom also, so I'm always on the road driving my daughter to and from dance. So this is what's going on today. Just on the go. My brain is functioning, I promise.
Okay. Yeah, I was a dance mom for a while, but
You were a dance mom?
Yeah. I was the schlepper of children to and from until they turned 16. And I was like, okay, this is great. You get to drive yourself. And then they're like, yeah, I want to quit dance. Oh, you were driving yourself at least once to this.
Yeah, I can't imagine that my daughter would quit. She's probably one of the most dedicated people I've ever met. But I see the senior girls driving themselves to dance in the parking lot. And I'm like, oh, one day.
Someday. Okay. So I appreciate you joining us again, Rachel. Carrie has had another conflict. She does exist. I can let you know that we're not just hiding Carrie. She should normally be joining us, but she again had a conflict. So we're continuing our saga of e-commerce fundamentals. We talked initially about just what e-commerce is, and then we talked about the components of e-commerce. And last week we talked about the so exciting topic of sales tax when it comes to e-commerce. And as equally, I think it's equally on the same plane of complications as well as things that cause accountants and bookkeepers to run screaming from e-commerce is inventory management. And it just boils down to managing the quantities, buying and selling of stuff. Rachel, just to put it in a fundamental term, would you say that's an accurate assessment? Or
Definitely.
Would you say there's more to it than that?
Yeah, I think that the reason that quite simply the reason why people like to stay away from it, it's always in flux. I was just talking about this with one of my clients yesterday. They're always buying stuff and then they're always selling stuff. There's never a day when there's just stuff sitting. It's always moving. Because of that, it's very dynamic. The potential to mess it up is there. So I think people like to stay away from it.
And do you think it's from accounting professionals' perspective that want to stay away from it? Or is it more of the business owner themselves, like they have trouble managing their inventory stock levels? Or is it sometimes a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two. I know that sometimes bookkeepers and accountants don't really want to get involved with that. They really only want to record the accounting piece of it and really just stay away from anything more than that. I find that there are some business owners that are really savvy with their inventory. Oftentimes they have a background in that. And so they really have a grasp on warehouse operations and that kind of thing. Other business owners don't know so much about it. And especially e-com sellers might be new to the game and not necessarily have a lot of knowledge about that, because now it's anybody can sell stuff online. So I think for those kinds of sellers, there definitely is a learning curve when it comes to knowing what you need to know about inventory.
Yeah. I think when it comes down to the general concepts of inventory management, we broke it down into prior workshops of just like 3 major categories. And I'm going to share that in the chat. I think this should take you to the workshop listing. If you're an existing subscriber or member to School of Bookkeeping, you'll be able to access these things. We do have a workshop listing free membership, right? So you can sign up for that and be able to access the prior workshops as well as our YouTube channel as well. But we have a section about inventory where we did some workshops where we broke it down into 3 classifications of inventory management from a business perspective, right? So I buy some stuff and I sell the same stuff. That is like the easiest form of inventory management. I just buy something and
Yeah.
resell
And I
it.
usually call those
Just,
people resellers.
yeah. So I'm reselling a thing, right? Shirts, apparel, those types of things is an easy example of that kind of scenario or that kind of situation. Then there is the junior varsity version of inventory management, which I buy some stuff, I do something to that stuff, and then I sell something else,
Mhm.
right? Which could be a combination of some of the stuff that I bought, or maybe I'm making something out of it. Those are where those Etsy shop owners are going to come in, where they typically will make some kind of crafty thing, or it's a bundling or a gift basket or some kind of combination of the original stuff that they bought. So that's more of that adds another complexity to managing the inventory levels because you're turning something into a finished good, which is typically different than what you bought, right? That been your experience as well in the inventory management space.
Yes. And then what's your third?
Oh, the third one is I buy stuff, I put stuff in different places,
Yeah.
and I need to know where all of that stuff is at any given time.
Yes,
So,
definitely. I would also throw in, and this is still very high level, am I doing a periodic inventory? Am I doing a perpetual inventory?
mm,
Or am I not even really doing inventory? I'm just purchasing things and recognizing cost of goods sold right when I buy. That is
and,
for really simple people.
yeah, let's unpack that there. So you have periodic inventory versus perpetual inventory. Let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit and unpack those
Yeah.
terms just so that people get a good understanding of the difference between the two.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to say this is because with fundamentals and really understanding the basics of this, you run into these differences all of the time, and you really have to understand when you look at a potential client's books to see what they're doing. Um, and I'll start with what I said was the simplest of simple. This is really for people that don't know much about inventory, costing, anything at all. Or simple businesses where it's totally appropriate to do this. I had one time a client that was like selling, they had like wood or logging stuff, like wood, I don't know, wood supplies or something. And all of their purchase, they just hit cost of goods sold right away. So that, and what that means is that we're recognizing that expense on the P&L right away. And the trouble that you could run into is that sometimes you're purchasing a lot of stuff. And so you have a very high cost in that period. And sometimes it can be even more than your revenue. And so you're expensing a lot of stuff, and then it could potentially cause a big loss for you. And sometimes the tax implication is, and I'm not a tax accountant at all, but sometimes you're going to get a big loss. And so sometimes it can just be upside down. You don't necessarily want that. And again, it's just a very simple way of doing it. Let's say I'm just selling tennis equipment and I go to the tennis equipment warehouse and I'm just buying a whole bunch of tennis equipment and I'm just expensing it right when I purchase it, but I also have it for sale. That's all that is. I'm not entering something into inventory as an asset, nothing. So that's hitting cost of goods sold right away. And I believe it or not, I see that with a lot of people, even when they shouldn't be doing it. Okay,
Right.
that's number one. Number two is a periodic inventory. And that is when I am buying a whole bunch of materials that I'm putting into inventory, meaning I'm not expensing that cost of goods sold right then. I'm actually purchasing inventory items and I'm placing it into an inventory account which is an asset on the balance sheet. Okay. So now I've gone to my tennis warehouse and I purchased a whole bunch of tennis wear and supplies and tennis rackets and tennis balls. And that's sitting in an inventory. Okay. So now if I have a tennis shop or an online store, I don't have the resources or the staff or the time to constantly count that inventory and do what's called a perpetual inventory. So I'm going to do a periodic inventory. And what that means is I'm not even going to necessarily keep track of it as I sell it. I'm going to take one count right when I buy it. Usually it's whatever arrives is what you have. You don't necessarily need to do a count. Then I'm going to at either once a quarter, once every maybe 6 months, or once a year, I'm going to take another count. And presumably I've bought some more stuff. I've sold a whole bunch more stuff. And then I'm just going to record that difference in that count to cost of goods sold. So that's when I'm recognizing the cost of goods sold. And I'm not really necessarily concerned with knowing what my inventory is after every single sale. Now, then the third one is called a perpetual inventory. And that's when we know our inventory after every single sale. And so what happens with that is we expense that little bit of cost of goods sold that's associated with that one item, which we've preloaded into the software. And so that little bit of cost of goods sold gets recognized with each individual sale. And then my inventory is adjusted with every single sale. So every single sale adjusts my inventory. Every purchase adjusts my inventory, but I always know what that inventory is because I'm keeping track of that inventory on a perpetual basis, meaning after every sales transaction, I am aware of what my inventory is. And that's not to say you shouldn't go in and still count it because things fall off the back of a truck or things get
Yep.
crushed in the warehouse and there's always
High
breakage
finger
and loss.
discount.
Yeah. And so you're still want to count, but in my experience, there's always differences just because of that. But you still have a general sense of what your
Mhm.
inventory is because you're keeping track of it perpetually in your inventory management software.
Counting your calories every day rather than just at the end of every month, stepping on the scale and wondering, was it a good
Yeah.
month? Or
Yeah.
cost,
And for
cost of goods
e-commerce
eaten.
yeah, exactly. And e-commerce sellers, you really want a perpetual inventory. Why do you think that would be, Dan?
Yeah, so that was my question. Now, for an e-commerce, what would be best? I can imagine, especially if you're selling in multiple places. If you're a brick and mortar store and you're also selling that stuff online, you would want to know what levels that you have so that you don't sell out of something on any given day. So if an order comes in from the website and then somebody goes to fulfill it and, oh my goodness, I do not have it available to sell. Now I've got a customer service issue where now I need to talk to the customer and let them know it's on back order or give them an idea of when that's coming in, all of those things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
That sort of thing.
definitely. And some marketplaces, such as Amazon and Walmart marketplaces, have rules and regulations. You can't have out of stocks. Now,
Mhm.
you can have stuff on back order, and as long as you're communicating that with them. But if it's showing that you have stock, and then they purchase it, and then it turns out you don't have it, you really have out of stocks, you're violating your agreement with them. So you have to be really
Yeah.
careful about that. So you want to make sure that you have one inventory hub that's accurately counted and tracked perpetually, and then that can push out those levels to your various
All right.
marketplaces and platforms, and that way it's accurate.
All right. So now we've determined that for an e-commerce seller, it makes sense to do a perpetual inventory, basically knowing the status of your inventory at any given time. So then it becomes a matter of where do you manage that, right? So where's the inventory at any given time? We determined that's the best option. Then for an e-commerce seller, then the big question is determining where are they going to be tracking that perpetual inventory, right? What is going to be their source of truth, right? Which now that we've determined from before, okay, they've got a sales channel, they've got some bridge between, and they've got their QuickBooks, right? So either end of the spectrum is going to be a place to manage that, right? If you do it on the sales channel, that's where you got to live. That's where you got to live with those. Does the sales channel, or does this is a question now to answer, does the sales channel allow for the proper management of your inventory as far as ordering, receiving, calculating costs, those types of things inside of that package, or does it not? Right. So then that sort of thing is going to be then now, okay, I need another way to manage that. Maybe it's in my QuickBooks. Now, when we talk about, so let's just talk about that before we go into the other caveat of maybe introducing another app into this equation. But what have you found has been with your clients the better option, right? So as far as I'm going to track it inside QuickBooks, or I'm going to track it inside of my sales channel, where do they tend to live for that, and why? And this is a weighted question.
But it's also a really, really good question. Probably the most important question.
Yeah.
The most. I exclusively work in QuickBooks Online. So all of my answers are coming from the perspective of QuickBooks Online. I'm an advanced pro advisor for QuickBooks Online. And so although there is an inventory function in QuickBooks Online, it does have some limitations. But if a business owner falls within the realm of these limitations, they can absolutely use it.
Right. And we had talked about the different complexities. It's the first one where I
Yes,
buy the stuff and I
exactly.
sell the stuff.
Exactly. So they are resellers. So resellers can use it because it is really made for buying inventory and reselling inventory. It's not meant for any kind of manufacturing or any kind of assembly. It doesn't have that capability. However, if you are reselling, you can resell individual items or you can bundle them. You can do that in QuickBooks Online, and you can push the bundle levels to one channel. And notice I said one channel. You can't do more than one channel. So let's say, for instance, I am connecting my QuickBooks Online inventory with Etsy, or let's say Etsy. Let's say Shopify. Then if I'm only connecting to Shopify, then it's going to push my inventory levels there just fine. But the problem is it gets confused if you try and connect in more than one channel. You can't do that. At that point, we really want to utilize an external inventory management system that we can then turn off inventory in QuickBooks. And by the way, in order to use the inventory function in QuickBooks, you do have to be using Plus or Advanced. You can't do it in Simple Start, Essentials. So in QuickBooks Online, you would have to disable that. And then you would move your inventory items into external cloud-based inventory app, which there are many. And like you had also alluded, that sometimes the marketplaces and platforms do have their own inventory management solution. They do. They're usually very limited. I wouldn't use something like that because then they limit you to only in that platform or in that
Right.
marketplace. So in my experience, it's better to be with a neutral inventory hub. And then that way you can just connect in the marketplaces and the platforms that you want. And you have one hub and it sends your levels to all of those platforms, and all of those different platforms and marketplaces, they don't get confused. So you have
Right.
one amount that is pushing to all those levels, and then it's sending a valuation back to QuickBooks. So QuickBooks, it's super important in the process, but it's really just collecting all of the value of that inventory. So it's
Right.
decreasing when you're selling. So it's communicating the sales to QuickBooks that your inventory is decreasing. And then when you're making purchases with those inventory hubs, you're sending the purchase orders usually turn into bills, and then they send that to QuickBooks. And then so then your inventory increases on the balance sheet with said POs. So in QuickBooks, you're having a value that's always dynamic, increasing, decreasing, but you're not managing those actual items in there. And my clients get confused with that all the time.
Yeah. So that's a great point. As we're determining like where are we living for inventory management, there are a combination of workflows that go into the inventory management piece of that, to your point, if you're managing all of that in Shopify, for example, and does it actually do purchase order? Can you submit a purchase order for inventory out of Shopify to your supplier? I don't know.
Not
Yeah.
in Shopify, but if you utilize inventory management app in the Shopify app store, like Stocky, yes, you can. So, and then those just update your levels in Shopify. But then guess what? I have clients that come to me and say, oh, but then now I want to sell on Amazon. So we got to take the inventory out of that and then put it in a hub that can connect into both. So that's a little bit of an issue that I'm finding now that I'm getting so much more into the nitty gritty with all of this different stuff is you really need an inventory hub. And especially if you're manufacturing, you have to. So they really think that you can go platform to platform, but you need to have a hub. And then that goes to platform to marketplace. It's really important to have that hub.
Yeah, because the apps and the solutions that are out there will just say, yeah, it'll send it to QuickBooks, or yeah, it'll work with
Exactly.
this. And the devil's always in the details. Right?
Yes,
So,
that's such an interesting thing you say, because they always say it makes it such a snap. It syncs with QuickBooks. Okay, but you have to understand what you want sending to QuickBooks, not just sends it. You have to know
Right.
what you want to go there.
Yeah, one of my first clients in the e-commerce space was using an application called Ecom Dash. Never heard of it before, learned a lot about it. And of course it said it syncs with QuickBooks, right? And it was really the main workflows that he was using it for was ordering and publishing his listings on Shopify and Amazon, right? So he could do listings in one place and then they could feed out into both places. And then it could then calculate his landed cost. And we'll talk a little bit about that and that sort of thing. But the synchronization to QuickBooks was only it would send a purchase order over to QuickBooks without any items on it. So when you look at that, I was like, oh, this is useless, because he's tracking his inventory over here. And then we were trying to use QuickBooks as a source of truth for his inventory management levels, because he was doing what you would just talk about with the I accounted for all of my purchases at the time that I purchased it. I'm like, you got to get out of that. You got to be you're wondering to know your perpetual inventory, but then you're accounting for it all when you purchase it. No, doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Can't have cake and eat it too when it comes to inventory tracking.
Yeah. And you also,
So
if the POs are coming over and you're managing your inventory in QuickBooks and you're using those product service items as inventory items, the purchase order has to have the items so you can add 100 more widgets into your inventory. The difference would be if you have turned off that inventory function and your product service items are essentially service items only, it'll send the PO as a bill. And most of them now are quite sophisticated, and it'll still say I'm purchasing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 widgets, but it's a product service item that is not tied to an inventory value. It's just increasing inventory. That's all. It's hard to explain, but all I'm going to say is we're just increasing the value of our inventory when we have a bill like that. That's launching into a whole other discussion about product service items and QuickBooks that we don't need to do. But that is an important piece of it, is really understanding product service items in QuickBooks. And man, there's a lot to know.
You can't, well, and that's really the goal of what we're trying to drive home here is that you can't commingle or have this inventory management split across the different apps. You have one source of truth, and that's the term. And with your client conversations, understanding where that source of truth is going to be, right? So it's either going to be in the sales channel, but there are things you're eliminating out of the workflows of QuickBooks
Yes.
by doing so, right? And so if you live in QuickBooks and live, breathe, and work in QuickBooks, of all the things that you are going to be, the workflows that you're going to have your client or yourself doing, and they're living somewhere else, then that's going to be a changing of your engagement, right? And so either you're going to have to be familiar with that, or you're going to have to deal with the consequences of maybe not knowing what's going on with some of those things and just letting the chips fall where they may when that happens to come in, or another way of communicating those things and getting that QuickBooks reality to match what happened in
Reality.
with with a reseller. So we'll just use this example of a reseller where I buy stuff, I sell stuff, and they're selling on multiple sales channels, by Amazon, Etsy. What I tend to recommend is, yes, go ahead and manage the inventory levels in QuickBooks, because you can do that. But then that now tells me that what bridge I'm using between the two, all the sales channels in QuickBooks. I would recommend like a WebGility, right? Because a WebGility allows for, that's one of the things I really like about that particular connector, is that it does allow for the decrement of QuickBooks, the SKU or the item in QuickBooks, and then it immediately goes back out and updates the inventory levels in the other channel.
Oh, that's
right?
awesome.
So
I didn't realize WebGility did that. So WebGility then acts as that hub that communicates to all the levels. So
exactly,
it reads it and it goes, okay, Amazon and
yep,
Shopify and blah, blah, blah. I now have 5 of those, not 6.
exactly.
Oh, that's really
So if you sell something on Amazon, Shopify ultimately knows about it. If you sell something on Shopify, Amazon knows
So in
about
that
it.
situation,
But
you
you got
can manage in QuickBooks and then do your levels.
right,
Okay, so that's great.
right. But and that way you're focusing in QuickBooks, and you'll be able to manage the purchasing and the
Yes.
receiving, and the selling will come in because of the bridge. And then you're also managing it's allowing it to manage the inventory stock levels on those sales.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a delicate situation, right? So
Yeah.
typically what happens is, and you could probably attest to, the clients add more things, right?
Yeah.
If they change their listing, or they create custom items or something in Shopify, for example, and now QuickBooks does nothing about that. And so subsequently, neither does Amazon.
And
They
then
could potentially break all of
the rule is if I have it in one place, it's got to be in the other place. Otherwise, it will not communicate. So then they'll add a whole bunch of items in here and then they won't be added here. And then they'll never come through with sales. So yeah, that's risky. And I don't love that. And I love that when I'm training them, here's the one hub. New items go in here, period, end of story. Then they get pushed up to wherever. But they still have to be created on the platform side too. But yeah, there's just a lot of different moving parts. And then don't forget that situation with WebGility, that's only for resellers. So when it's appropriate
right.
for them to do their inventory.
Exactly.
QuickBooks.
So that leads me to my next comment of, okay, when it's not a reseller type of situation where it's I buy stuff and I sell the same stuff and I just need to manage the levels, right? Then you're introducing, okay, I can't necessarily, and I've got multiple sales channels potentially. I need something else to manage my inventory, and understanding that's where I'm going to be living for my inventory. And then those sales channels are going to be feeding into that. And then that's going to be what's talking to QuickBooks. So understanding where the work is going to lie in now 3 things or 3 or 4 things, right? You could basically be having 3 different applications, 3 or 4 different applications here. But when you're looking at an inventory management cloud-based application, they're not all created equal either, right? the common ones and the ones that you're mostly familiar with, right? Are the katanas of the world and the SOS
Yeah.
inventories
Yeah.
and the Sin 7 core, right? And those are the
Yeah.
more common
Yeah.
ones that I've heard of as well.
There's a few others out there that I know. I've definitely talked to them at conferences. Katana, I really like. It's cloud-based. One of the reasons I really like it is because it's very cost-effective, and it's also the interface is very simple to use and understand. The training is also quite simple, but something like that is perfect for manufacturers because it has just a really easy to understand interface. The connectivity is really great. It integrates with everything. It also integrates with shipping platforms such as ShipStation or Shippo. So that way, when you have shipped items, it updates your inventory that way. I also have used SOS inventory, which is good. The interface is a little more difficult for me to understand, but I have used it before. I like it. Sin 7 Core, it was formerly Deer inventory. That's a really complex system to use, but it is amazing. And they also have all kinds of different integrations, like with SPS EDI for SPS Commerce EDI, which you need it's electronic data interchange, which you need for to fulfill chain stores. They only accept orders through EDI. And so if you don't have that ability, then you can't do business with them. So Katana doesn't have anything like that, but the Sin 7 Core does. So if you've got those needs, and not only that, Sin 7 also has Omni, which is if you have a client that has even more enterprise level need. So there are all kinds of different solutions out there, and all of them have different kinds of integrations, different kinds of inventory costings, different kinds of fancy landed cost allocations. But for simple manufacturers, for example, I just got a client the other day that manufactures clothing and like a specific sports clothing wear, and she buys fabric and she manufactures this clothing, this athletic clothing wear. And I don't know, maybe has 15 SKUs, but definitely manufactures. And so we need to keep track of that cost. And Katana is perfect for her because we have a pretty simple manufacturing operation, but we are able to see everything very clearly and simply. And she was able to pick it up in a day. So something like that is a really great thing to use because she's selling on one sales platform and wants to sell on more. So we set it up where she's getting all of her items loaded into Katana and we're plugging in Shopify, but then she wants to be able to sell on other platforms to come and scale up. So that's why another reason these hubs are really great is because they really help the clients do the correct thing from the beginning, and then they can scale up very easily.
So that's another thing to consider in, right? When we had talked about the different components of you've got your sales channel, you've got some bridge between that sales channel and then ultimately your accounting source of truth, which would be in this case your QuickBooks. If you are introducing a more robust inventory management piece, you also want to make sure that that inventory management component now takes the place of the bridge between the two, right? So if at first you were doing a WebGility type of thing where it just sits between the sales channels and QuickBooks as your source of truth, then now WebGility just goes by the wayside because you want to make sure that your inventory management component is the one that's doing the talking to the sales channels. Is that what you've come across?
Yes, definitely. And not only that, because I am quite involved in inventory and how these platforms work, as a QuickBooks Pro advisor, we've been listening to this for years now about advisory and that kind of thing. For me, my advisory really comes into this. And I know that there are some other e-commerce bookkeepers and accountants that really just want to record the transactions, and that's really all they want to look at, and they don't really want to get involved in the inventory. Maybe they don't know how, but there's definitely a community out there where we're all really supportive of each other, where we do get involved in that inventory and want to learn as much as we can and be advisors to our clients in this space. And being able to understand these differences with all these different platforms is really important. And as a bookkeeper and accountant, I can definitely increase my price point because this is a lot more intricate. So, like you said, going from a platform like or a connector like WebGility into something like Katana or Sin7, where now, what if my client doesn't even understand how to use something like this? Now, with my expertise and understanding how to navigate around Katana and with understanding how inventory works, I can get more involved with that with them and become even that much more of an advisor. So there is room for pro advisors, people working in QuickBooks Online with clients that have inventory to get involved in this. And there's organizations such as Woodard that's really supportive with that and very encouraging for us to get folks out of desktop into these cloud-based platforms.
Yeah. And that brings up another thing, right? If your source of truth is desktop and you're using maybe an enterprise, how does that impact your workflows in QuickBooks versus how do I get my data into those things? Because you could feasibly be doing your inventory management because that does allow for greater inventory management when you're using like an enterprise platform or something like that. But have you found with the different cloud-based inventory application that their integrations with a Shopify would you be giving up something by going with Sin7 Core, for example, or Katana that as far as getting the integration from Shopify or Amazon? Is it any better or worse from one over the other?
Do
you understand my
I
question?
do. I don't know that I'm qualified enough to answer that question. I have not had a problem with the integration. And by that, I just mean, let's say I make a change in the inventory platform and I say, oh, okay, I make a change. I'm from 100 to 75. And then I look in Shopify and has that been updated? Yes, instantly. So I find that the connection quick as far as levels, but I don't know if you're asking me something else than that.
As far as, because like I know what's going to happen from Shopify through WebGility into QuickBooks. I know how that integration is going to work. I can go into QuickBooks or WebGility settings and make sure that whatever happens over in Shopify shows up the way I expected it to in QuickBooks. If I'm now eliminating that middleman app in lieu of an inventory management app because I have more robust inventory needs, and that's the one that's connecting to Shopify. Have you found that's okay, right? Like that
Yeah.
particular connection is okay. Like you're not,
Yeah. Oh,
I mean,
yes.
because these,
Yes. Yeah. That. Now, the more fancy and pricey the app is, the better the accounting. The better the accounting settings you'll have. And so you can map to really anything. Some of them that are a little more low cost have very limited accounting, but they're working on, say, for instance, Katana, they're definitely working on that. They're increasing the accounting capability and GL accounts that you can choose from on the Katana side, and adding some other things such as landed cost. With something like Sin7, which is formerly Deer, oh, the accounting functions in that are incredible. I actually went to the Deer implementation training in Denver and they demoed that and it was incredible. It was really, I could customize anything I want with the accounting.
that's good.
Yeah.
Good to know. And so that's great to know. And I think we'll come in for a landing on our landing cost of our inventory discussion here. Now, some of the other things that we're going to be chatting about and things that we've alluded to is fulfillment, right? That is a definite concern of how do I get stuff now that I've got an order? How do I get stuff to and communicate that with the customer? So join us next week when we discuss yet another topic of the e-commerce fundamentals We appreciate you joining in this week, and we'll see you next time on the Workshop Wednesday.